I got the day off today, kind of a surprise day off. I wasn't expecting to be having the day off today, except that I am working this weekend, so this actually is my day off. All right. What am I going to do today? Going to actually go and build a picnic table. I think that would be kind of fun to have a picnic table, so I'm going to go and get the materials to put that together. Was going to do a video talking about the credible threat, so I'm going to wait for a few people to come into the chat before I get started on the credible threat theory and how that is explained. One of the things I would like to thank is all the new subscribers who have come to the channel. Thank you very much. We've had like 300 new subscribers over the last month. So that's exciting to see the channel growing like that. I've also been invited down to Las Vegas for the Silver Symposium. So I'm really looking forward to the Stock Plus Silver Symposium here at the end of the month, where I'll be hopefully doing a speaking engagement, whether I sit on a panel or actually get up and kind of give my opinion about things. Still not quite sure what it is I'll be doing down there, but I'm going to be going down there and doing my thing. So very excited about that. There's a link down in the description to the event. So I believe that they are giving a discount at this time, but that's going to end shortly. So depending on when you're watching the video and when you hit that link down in the description to the Stock Plus Silver Symposium event, you might be able to get a discount still yet. Let's talk a little bit about the credible threat theory, because that's one that I feel is probably one of the most prevalent tools of the Federal Reserve that I don't think a lot of people are giving it credit for. And really, when you think about like Ben Bernanke giving the speech back in 2002, I believe it was, deflation and how to keep it from ever happening here, I think is what the title of it was. Anyway, there's a link down in the description to that as well. He really lays it out that the Federal Reserve was going to be running into the lower bound of zero. And now when you think about what the lower bound is when the Federal Reserve just can no longer drop interest rates any further to stimulate the economy. And that puts their monetary policy tools ineffective. But he said that that's not the only monetary policy tools that they have, and that they could use their own words. Now, today they refer to it as jawboning or forward guidance, or my favorite one, signaling, right? They signal to the markets what they're about ready to do. But this forward guidance, jawboning, or signaling, and what I like to refer to as the credible threats, has now become like the main policy tools of the Federal Reserve, and I don't think a lot of people really give it enough credit. So when we think back to this Federal Reserve speech given by Ben Bernanke way back 21 years ago, or whatever it is now, in that speech, he describes what the credible threat theory looks like. And he uses a little story of a guy who invents a gold machine. With this gold machine, he can produce as much gold at will, very little cost or energy that goes into it. Now, the moment that the information gets out to the markets that this guy has invented this machine, the price of gold on the market would fall, even before the guy produces a single ounce of gold. Even before the guy produces the machine that can produce the gold. The credible threat alone that he can do it would be enough to make the markets fall as far as gold prices go. And that's ultimately the credible threat theory. And now, if you think back, you could probably find a lot of examples of the credible threat theories that were being used. And my favorite one that I like to use is the special purpose vehicles that were set up during the pandemic. Now, when you think about these special purpose vehicles that were set up, it was 13 lending facilities that were only able to be put into existence because of the unusual and exigent circumstances coming from the pandemic, right? So now the Treasury and the Federal Reserve have unusual and exigent circumstances to set up these lending facilities. One of those lending facilities in particular was the corporate debt lending facility. And now when this lending facility was set up and funded with hundreds of billions of dollars, and if I got it right, it was something like $650 billion that they said that this lending facility has in order to buy corporate debt to keep the to protect the fallen angels. That's the excuse they used, is that they wanted to keep the fallen angels from having to suffer through this pandemic and the lack of liquidity or lack of financing and stuff like that. So they were going to be there to buy these corporate debts. So they set up this lending facility, funded it with $650 billion. And, when you think about how much money that is, prior to the great financial crisis, I'm just going to step it back here real quick. In 2007-8, the Federal Reserve balance sheet was $850 billion. Like the whole Federal Reserve balance sheet was $850 billion. This lending facility had $650 billion, right? That it could go out there and buy corporate debt with. So this was a credible threat because the Federal Reserve did buy some corporate debt. Like they established the credible threat with the lending facility. They funded it. They bought a little bit of corporate debt and then mass media attention to this facility. And that's what ended up taking place that caused a lot of people to look at this and say, holy moly, the Federal Reserve is going to be buying corporate debt. And they started front running the Federal Reserve. They started buying into corporate debt because if they could buy into this corporate debt first, right, buy into these bonds of these corporations, then what would happen is as the Federal Reserve started buying into it, it would start causing the prices to go up and the yields to fall. And they were speculating that they would be able to then profit by selling those bonds back to the Federal Reserve. So now that's not the only thing that was happening at the time, because as the Federal Reserve was engaging in quantitative easing, they were dropping the yields on the U.S. Treasuries, which is the most safe asset that you can possibly buy, right? Or if you want to consider it an asset, but it's the safest bond that you can buy out there. And so now the fixed income investors out there who were looking at the treasury yields being so low had to go out there and search for a yield somewhere, and they were finding it in the corporate debt. The higher, more you go out on the risk scale, the higher the yields get. And so the only place they could really find any kind of return was up there in the corporate debt facility, or in the corporate debt market. As this facility was going to buy into that corporate debt, everybody started flooding into it. And this drove down the yields on these corporations' bonds. And now these corporations were able to gorge on incredibly cheap debt during this time. The Federal Reserve and the Treasury hardly bought any corporate debt. They did a little bit. They established that credible threat. The markets went in there, started buying that all up. They funded these corporations, essentially bailed them out during a time of panic, right? And the Federal Reserve eventually sold off the little bit of corporate debt that they had and closed down the facility. It was a straight up credible threat, and it was one of the best ones that they had ever pulled off. And nobody really ever talks about it. Like, they hardly talk about how that facility was set up, the amount of money that went into it, the mass media attention that went to it, and the fact that they hardly bought any at all. I mean, they do talk about it a little bit, but not much. So let's see, how long? Okay, 8 minutes. That's not bad. We're just going to talk for just a little bit, maybe about a half an hour. I'm going to go and do a picnic table here in a little bit, so I thought I would just kind of bust this information out and see what you guys are up to this morning. Are you going to load up on bond ETFs when the rate comes down? No, probably not. I'm not much for buying into like the bond market or stuff like that. I'm much more into things that are going to be, in my opinion, a lot more liquid during a liquidity crisis. Like, when you have things that are much closer to cash, bonds can be very illiquid. Like, how's the best way to describe it? It's like a highway going in and a goat trail going out. So like when the market starts to crash and they become illiquid, nobody's wanting to touch them, right? But gold, silver, even like Bitcoin to a lesser extent, these things are a lot more liquid as far as being able to sell them. Maybe not Bitcoin as much, but definitely gold and silver and some of these other items. So to me, like, liquidity crisis that I feel that is going to be taking place here over the next, 6 months to a year or whatever, I feel that being in a cash position and not something that is, debt position is the way I feel about it anyway, if I'm explaining that right. Okay. Yo, what's up? What's going on, UE? Nope, just had the day off, so thought I'd do a little stream. Yep, early morning stream. Let's go. Yeah, you bet. I'll be let's do this for like another 20 minutes. The reverse repo drain is happening. Yeah, this is something that I thought was interesting. They set up that reverse repo. This is kind of like, you have to kind of know a lot about it. How they move the effective fund rate, right? So the Fed funds rate is a target rate, right? And they wrote it on the wall saying, hey, this is what we're shooting for. The effective fund rate used to be the overnight lending rate that came from the big banks, right? That was during a limited reserve system. That's what they referred to it as, a limited reserve system. And that's when the big banks, at the end of the day, some of them would be in need of reserves and some of them would have excess reserves. The ones who had excess reserves would lend them to the ones who were in need of reserves. That overnight lending rate was the effective fund rate. If the Federal Reserve needed to adjust that, they would buy and sell treasuries off those big banks, adjusting the amount of reserves they would have. And now this limited reserve system worked out pretty well for as far as adjusting interest rates on that overnight lending. Now, they moved into what they refer to as an abundant reserve system, or ample reserves. And this is where the big banks didn't have like this overnight lending rate thing going on anymore. Now, the reason that all took place was, if you go back to September of 2019, that's when all of a sudden these big banks ran out of cash, like they ran out of liquidity, and the interest rates on that overnight lending shot up to 10%. They opened up that repo facility and essentially became a standing repo facility. They adjusted the way the big banks have their reserves when they fired up the quantitative easing, and they made these things ample reserves or abundant reserve systems. So the Federal Reserve right now is engaged in quantitative tightening. And as much as people want to believe that the Federal Reserve is a money printing machine that never stops printing money, we are actually going into a contraction of the money supply. And a lot of people don't want to believe that, but that's kind of what's happening right now. And it's like one of the first times that it's happened since like the Great Depression that it's actually been to a scale that has been significant like this. Not like this, but significant. Now, when we think about what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing, I mean, they are pulling treasuries and mortgage-backed securities out of the market. And this repo facility is eventually not going to really be needed if we continue into a system in which that the reserves are depleting, or moving into a limited reserve system again, where they don't need the repo facility. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily the move that the Federal Reserve is going towards, but it very well could be, since they are trying to go into this monetary contraction system. So anyway, that's kind of my opinion. I don't know. We got to wait and see what's going to happen here. Where are my glasses? There we go. All right. My ETF portfolio is only 1%. Total bond market. Should it be more? I'm in my late 20s, investing for medium to long term. I mean, I don't know, 1%? My ETF is just 1% total bond market? Huh. I don't know. I'm not much of an investor. You're going to have to figure that one out for yourself, man. I mean, I know that if you are young, then you should be taking advantage of compounding interest as best as you can. I mean, that is like, being young is by far the best thing for investing in the world, is that you can take advantage of that compounding interest. All right, credible threat theories. Let me hold on one second. I got something on my glasses here. All right, let's see here. Credible threat theories are cool, but I consider your streams credible theoretical threats, Simon. Thanks. Or theoretical treats. I'm sorry. I thought they were. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, man. But this is just stuff that I figured out. I mean, whether or not you use it, understand it, accept it, believe it, just entertained by it, whatever. I mean, it's all for your use. All right, Matt, what's happening? Uneducated Economist. It must be lunchtime. No, actually, I have the day off today. So, who's your favorite economist? Who's my favorite economist? I have like lists of economists, depending on what it is that I want the theory, like what kind of understanding of theory that I want. If you want to hear things about like how gold is going to be like the winner of currencies or whatever, then you listen to people like Peter Schiff or something like that. If you want to hear about Eurodollar stuff like Jeff Snyder, like there's so many, like what kind of perspective do you want? Like to me, I think more perspectives, the better understanding that you have. And so as far as a favorite, I think it would depend on the topic that I want to like research at the time would, determine my favorite. I like Peter Schiff because he was probably the number one most influential economist to me when I was first getting started. I would listen to more Peter Schiff stuff than anybody else, and which is kind of funny because, like, I think a lot of our opinions about the economy now between Peter Schiff and I are quite different. But that's just like just what we end up, the way we see it, right? So I don't know. I have to give him a lot of credit though. That's like that was my guy when I was trying to figure this stuff out. All right. Have you ever heard of table banking? I haven't. What about a wood report as far as like lumber prices and lumber and everything else? Lumber is really boring right now. Like there's not a lot going on in the lumber industry. And I mean, I wish I could tell you something that's going to be really awesome. Like there's these shortages and all kinds of price hikes coming and, make it really appealing for, people to get like, all freaked out over or something like that. But lumber's typically a very boring market that doesn't really do anything. And, the fact that I was in the middle of it when it got real exciting and was able to talk about it from so many different angles and from so many different perspectives that I have, just simply being in the middle of like timber country and stuff. There's not a lot to talk about. Like, I mean, lumber is trading between 5 and 550, and it's been doing that for like a month, a little over a month. Home building sentiment is like right there at the edge. If it was to pop, then I think that it would, definitely drive prices up. There's certainly a limited amount of inventory out there. Mill curtailments have been taking place for over a year. The mill curtailments are to such a level that the byproduct, the pulp that comes from it, is limiting the amount of wood burning pellets that we can get from the factory that makes wood burning pellets. So there is quite a bit of a limited supply of wood out there, but it's not like it's unavailable. Like when you order it, it shows up, right? So it's not like it's got these long lead times and dramatic price swings to it or something like that going on. I think that if the buyers, like the buyer traffic, I think that's probably the one thing that's really holding back a lot of the home builders. If they saw more buyer traffic coming to the market, then that would probably get them encouraged to go out there and build a lot more. But right now, because that is in negative territory, I'm assuming that we're probably going to find that there's not going to be a lot of appeal to go into like any kind of housing boom. All right. Do you have a recommended reading list for economics? Really, the only two things that I can really recommend that I have read, and this is like kind of crazy to think, because a lot of people are like, man, what are the list of books that you've ever read? The Creature from Jekyll Island, Geo Griffin, who I'm hoping to meet here in a few weeks down in Vegas at the Stock Plus Silver Symposium. He's going to be the keynote speaker down there, so I'm super looking forward to that. So The Creature from Jekyll Island is probably one of the most important books for anybody who's going to be studying the Federal Reserve to read. And then the other one is the essay, Cantillon's essay on economic theory. Those two are really the only two like books that I've ever read on economics. I've listened to a lot of people, a lot of lectures, a lot of opinions, a lot of YouTube videos, and then I've read a lot of Federal Reserve documents themselves, a lot of old speeches and new speeches, and just things that came directly from the Federal Reserve. Like even like the repo facility. I was talking about the repo facility before just about anybody was, and it was a video that I had done called Things Are Changing, and I had no clue how important the repo facility was going to end up being in just a few months. But it was the Federal Reserve who was lighting up about it, so they knew there was going to be issues coming. That's why all this stuff is so, the credible threat theory for me is so prevalent. Like, it's like literally putting on a pair of glasses, and it was just like, okay, so what's going on in the media? What are they talking about? Okay, let's put on the credible threat theory glasses and see what we have going on out here. Because everything out there seems to be a credible threat to me when it comes to the mainstream media. Anytime there is a Federal Reserve official out there giving some kind of mainstream media interview, that's credible threats right there. right? That is them trying to get the markets to understand in a particular direction. Because there was a time when the Federal Reserve was very quiet. They hardly said anything except for the, give their policy statement, and then they would be quiet again. They were very, very quiet organization for the longest time. It's only been a recent phenomenon that they're out there blasting their gums all over the mainstream media, and that's part of the credible threat theories, So even when it comes down to, and this is one that, I mean, a lot of people shake their heads at, giving me all kinds of reasonings why this one's, inaccurate. But to me, I mean, I still see it just as plain as day, especially when I put the credible threat theory on, is when the BRICS nations are out there doing transactions outside of the United States dollar, trying to dethrone the dollar, right? And now that right there to me is, I mean, I have a hard time fathoming the idea of the dollar being dethroned, right? Because the distant second place is so far in the distance from dethroning the dollar that it's very unlikely that it's going to be happening anytime in the near future, right? So all that news media of like BRICS gold currency and all this other stuff, it's all imaginary. There's no currency that even exists, right? But yet I've even seen people mention in my comment section of my video saying that they actually have anxiety built up because of this gold-backed currency that's going to destroy the dollar. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't exist. Like you can't have like this anxiety built up that something is going to take over that doesn't exist yet, right? I mean, is the threat there, the credible threat? Sure, right? But that's what it is, it's a credible threat. Until it actually happens, we don't, you can't take it into consideration. It's just a theory, it's just an idea, it's just their imagination. Now, whether they start engaging in it and actually making it happen, that's a different story, right? But that's not the story that's happening now. They're not engaging in transactions using this currency. And then on top of that, really, what is happening here? The Federal Reserve was asked prior to their money printing quantitative easing, how much money do you plan on printing? Right? And Jerome Powell's answer to that was, it depends on how much demand for our liabilities there are. That's a really interesting way to respond to how much money you're going to print. Like, you think, well, I don't know, we're going to print somewhere around $8 trillion, right? No, I mean, it was like, they said it depends on how much demand for our liabilities there are. So that means that the Federal Reserve is attempting to fulfill a demand, right? Their demand for liabilities, and now you got to fill it, right? You got to fill this demand. Now, there's two ways to do it. Either you can keep printing and fill the demand, or you can lower the demand, right? Get out of the dollar. Dollar sucks. De-dollarization. BRICS nations are awesome, right? Lowering the demand for liabilities. This is actually a relief for the Federal Reserve, who's trying not to fill the demand, but go the other way and go into quantitative tightening. So you can't go into quantitative tightening when the demand for liabilities continues to increase. You got to get that to decrease at the same time you're doing the quantitative tightening, or else it would offset your abilities to tighten, right? It would make it would. They're trying to get, the people to not use the dollar, right? That was the whole point of it. It was just like, that's, to me, at least with all this, if you were to look at it from the credible threat theory anyway. I don't know, did I explain all that right? They're trying to lower the demand for the dollar so they don't have to keep printing their liabilities into it. At least that's kind of what I see. All right, how many? We're 23 minutes. Okay, we're going to give it like another 7-10 minutes here. Okay, 7 or 10. Let's see here. Federal agents, big and strong. Okay, if you were the Fed, would you the same as they are doing? I wouldn't. I'm not one to say that this is the way the economy should work. I don't try and look at the economy that way. That's putting an expectation out there that cannot possibly be filled, right? My job, to me, is not to expect the economy to be in a particular direction, or to expect anything from like a politician or something like that. My feelings and my job and my understanding of it is to look at the economy for what it is, and then how to position myself to best deal with that, right? I don't want it to change, because a want to change is a negative, right? That's a negative feeling. You can't want something in your life. A want is a need, and a need is a negative energy. I want positive energy stuff. So I have to look out there at the economy and say, this is the way that it's operating, and now I need to figure out what it is that I need to do in order to operate within that. So it doesn't matter what the Fed does. I really don't care. Like, they can, up, down, or sideways, it doesn't matter, as long as I understand what it is that I need to do for myself in that position. All right, hit the like button. Yeah, please do. I mean, we got another, we can do it for another 10 minutes. We'll take it to 35 minutes. What are your thoughts on Austrian school? I think it's very important to understand all aspects of the economy from every direction, right? We live as Keynesians, right? I don't like it. But that's unfortunately the system that we now live in, right? Is just like this political atmosphere where they're using central banking authority in order to, try and, dictate how the economy is going to function. All that stuff is very manipulative, and there's free market forces that take place inside of that. And if you're not understanding of Austrian economics, then you're not going to understand the free market forces that are happening within this manipulative system. And so understanding both Austrian economics and Keynesian economics is very important for, again, the understanding of what it is that you need to do in order to operate within the system. But as far as like Austrian economics is the appropriate way to handle the economy, whatever. I mean, maybe if that's your opinion, but again, that's an expectation that can't possibly be filled. So, all right, it's getting crazy out there. Just checked out my Kaiser Permanente health insurance premiums for the next year. For a family, going up from $483 a month to $910 per month. Extra $5,000 a year went up. Ouch. Yeah, that hurts. All right, they cannot contracture gold. Oh, trying to like anyway. Awesome, man. Thanks for your answers. Yeah, you bet, man. Anytime. Fallen angels, you say. No kidding. Yeah, I know. I like that too. That was a really funny way of how they went about like giving this the what are like the sugar coating? What do they call that? I don't even know what the word is for it. The idea that it makes it okay, or however. All right, the market is granddaddy. It does what it wants. You can't make it call uncle. For sure. All right. Well, that's cool. That's like the end of our comments right there. Very nice. That's perfect timing anyway. We had 96 of you on the live stream here for the morning. That was so cool. 46 thumbs up. Thank you, everybody, for liking this video. And again, I am going down to Vegas at the end of the month to the Stock Plus Silver Symposium. And there's a link down in the description for that. Keynote speaker will be G. Edward Griffin, so very much looking forward to that. The author of one of the only books I've ever read on economics, so that's pretty cool. I get to hopefully meet G. Edward Griffin, shake his hand, and thank him for putting me on this path. And like really, if it wasn't for that book, I don't think I would actually be doing any of this stuff. So I mean, I really have to thank him. I owe him a lot. So thank you very much. Uneducated Economist. Do we have one more here that I want to say? Okay, all by design, it costs, takes everything. Keep doing your thing. All right, you should do more morning streams. Yeah, I mean, hey, how about this, guys? I will put out on the community page, I will do a poll. I'll do 2 polls, right? What time of day that I should do a live stream, and then what day should I do it? And I will make a regular scheduled event every single week that I will show up at the exact same time so that we can schedule the live stream event, get our questions ready, maybe get the topic ready, whatever it is that, make that live stream more appealing for everybody. So I will do that this afternoon. I'll put up a poll and we'll figure out which day at what time would be most appropriate for a live stream. All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining the live stream today. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.